September 18th, 2023. Los Angeles. The evening sky hung low and bruised over the city, the kind of purple-orange haze that made everything feel more dramatic than it already was. Gwen Stefani stood at the far end of her backyard terrace, staring out across the Hollywood Hills as a warm breeze rustled the lemon trees behind her. The golden lights of the city shimmered like restless thoughts, each one flickering with things she wished she could forget. Inside the house, a soft glow spilled across the living room floor as Blake Shelton stepped in from the hallway, holding 2 steaming mugs of tea. He could hear Gwen's distant sigh through the open door. She'd been quiet all day, too quiet. And Blake, who'd learned every shade of her silence over the years, felt the weight of something unspoken pressing into the air. He paused, not wanting to intrude too suddenly. But then he noticed her shoulders, slightly hunched, tense, almost trembling. He walked toward her with slow, careful steps. "Gwen," he said gently. She didn't turn around. You okay?" His voice was soft but honest, as if he already knew the answer. She finally turned her head, half smiling, half hiding something behind her eyes. "Just thinking." Blake nudged a mug toward her. "About what?" Gwen took the tea without looking at him. She wrapped her hands around it, as if the warmth might steady her. Blake stepped beside her, following her gaze out over the glowing city. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. There was something different in Gwen tonight, something raw and unsettled. Blake wasn't used to seeing her like this, not since the early days of their relationship, when the wounds of their past lives still lingered in the corners of every conversation. The tea steam curled between them as Blake's heart tightened. "Is this about that video again?" Gwen closed her eyes. She didn't ask how he knew. Blake always knew. The leaked backstage clip had resurfaced online earlier that week, spreading like wildfire across social media. Blake hadn't thought much of it at first. Old tour footage, grainy and out of context. But then he saw Gwen's name trending, and he clicked. What he found stopped him cold. A dimly lit room. Equipment cases stacked in the background. Gwen, 20-something, bright red lipstick, platinum hair, cropped tank top, standing rigid in a tense, confrontational stance. And across from her, a bandmate, face flushed, voice raised, arguing with her about something that fans and blogs could only speculate about. But it wasn't the yelling that got Blake. It was the look in Gwen's eyes. A look of betrayal. A look of pain. A look he recognized even now. He'd watched it twice, then stopped. There was something too personal about it. Something he wasn't sure he should pry into. Now Gwen finally turned toward him fully, her breath unsteady. "I hate that it came back. I hate that it's everywhere. I hate that it's all anyone wants to talk about." Blake reached for her free hand. "Then don't talk about it. You don't owe anyone an explanation." Gwen swallowed hard, her voice trembling around something deeper. "Yeah, but I owe you one." Blake felt his chest tighten. He wasn't sure where this was going, but he knew enough to brace. She set her mug down on the ledge. The evening breeze softened, as if the universe was holding its breath along with them. "That night," she said quietly, "I never told you what really happened." Blake didn't interrupt. He just waited, steady and patient, because something in her tone told him this was bigger than he'd imagined. Gwen exhaled shakily. "It wasn't just an argument. It was something that changed everything for me. Something I tried to bury." Blake stepped closer. "Whatever it is, I'm here." Gwen hesitated, then finally began. "It was 2002. San Diego. We were halfway through the tour. And everything felt like it was falling apart at once." The memory tightened her throat as she spoke. She could almost smell the venue corridors again. Stale beer, sweat, hairspray, and wires warmed by the heat of stage lights. "That night," she continued, "I found out one of my bandmates, someone I trusted, had been telling people things about me. Personal things. Things I told them in confidence." Blake frowned. "What kind of things?" Gwen's eyes clouded. Stuff about my relationship back then. Fights. Private moments. Things that weren't their business. And then I found out they'd gone to the label and implied I was unstable. That I couldn't handle the tour emotionally. Blake's jaw clenched. Why the hell would they do that? Gwen shook her head slowly. Because they wanted more control. More say. They wanted me to need them. And they knew the label would only listen if there was drama. The wind rustled the leaves behind them. Blake felt a slow burn rising through his chest. But he didn't speak. He just listened. Gwen looked down, her voice softening. When I confronted them backstage, things got uglier than the clip shows. They pushed me. Emotionally, verbally. They humiliated me in front of people. Called me unprofessional. Said I was making everything about myself. Blake felt his breath catch. Gwen. I held it together until they said one thing, she continued. One thing I'd told them in total confidence. Something about my family. And when I heard it come out of their mouth, something inside me just snapped. Her voice wavered. She brought a hand up to her face, pressing it lightly under her eye as if holding back a hurt she'd carried for decades. Blake rested a hand on her back, gentle and grounding. Why didn't you ever tell me this before? Gwen looked up at him with watery eyes. Because I didn't want you to see me like that. I didn't want you to think I was weak. Blake shook his head instantly. Weak. Gwen, that doesn't make you weak. That makes them a coward and you a survivor. Gwen's lips trembled into a sad smile. Maybe. But that night changed me. After they said what they said, I couldn't trust people the same way. I started building walls. Even with people who didn't deserve it. Blake felt those words land deeper than she realized. She took a shaky breath and continued. And the worst part. I let myself believe what they said about me. I let myself think I was too emotional. Too complicated. Blake turned her toward him fully, his voice more firm now. You are not too much. And you never were. Gwen blinked, and a tear escaped despite her attempt to hold it back. Blake brushed it away with his thumb. But that's not everything, she whispered. Blake's heartbeat tightened again. What else happened? Gwen grabbed the railing, as if she needed something solid to hold on to. After the blow-up, they went to the label and tried to get me replaced on part of the tour. They told them I wasn't fit to lead the band anymore. Blake's face hardened in disbelief. Are you kidding me? Gwen shook her head. I only found out later from one of the techs who overheard. He warned me privately. She swallowed. That's when I knew I had to confront them again. Not on camera. Not with the whole world watching. But alone. Blake felt tension twist through his shoulders. And what happened? Gwen's gaze drifted to the distant city lights. I told them if they ever betrayed me like that again, I'd walk. I'd end the tour. I'd end the band if I had to. She exhaled slowly. And they laughed at me. They laughed because they thought I'd never actually leave. Blake's breath tightened. He could almost feel the echo of that night, the backstage noise, the flicker of overhead bulbs, the sting of humiliation. Gwen continued. But they were wrong. Because that night, when I got back to my hotel, I packed a bag. I sat on the edge of the bed with everything swirling through my head. And for the first time, I realized I couldn't trust the people closest to me. Blake nodded, understanding more than she knew. That's the night you decided to start over. Gwen looked at him, surprised. Yeah. It was the beginning of that. And you went through that alone? Blake asked quietly. Gwen nodded. Completely alone. The heaviness of her words hung between them. Blake set his mug aside, placed both hands gently on her arms, and looked straight into her eyes. You're not alone now, he said. Not with me. Gwen blinked rapidly, emotion building again. I know. That's why I needed to tell you. Because when that clip resurfaced, it wasn't just embarrassing or dramatic. She paused. It brought back the fear. The fear that one day, something from my past could change the way you see me. Blake shook his head slowly. Gwen, nothing could change the way I see you. Not a clip. Not a rumor. Not a mistake. Her breath caught. I've been scared to tell you for years. Scared you'd see me as insecure. Or damaged. Blake wrapped his arms around her, pulling her in tight. Everyone's damaged. The difference is you've turned your damage into strength. She closed her eyes against his chest, letting herself breathe him in. The warmth of his flannel shirt, the faint hint of cedar and soap, the calm steadiness she'd come to rely on. After a moment, Blake guided her inside. The living room lights felt softer now, like the world was giving them space to heal. They sat on the couch, thighs touching, their mugs forgotten on the terrace ledge behind them. Why don't you tell me everything? Blake asked gently. Not just the part on camera. The whole night. Gwen hesitated only a moment, then nodded. It started before the confrontation, she said. Earlier that day, I found out my boyfriend at the time had said something hurtful about me to someone on the crew. Something about me being too emotional on tour. And I confided in my bandmate, who turned around and used it against me. Blake clenched his jaw. That's brutal. Gwen nodded. So I went into the backstage room still shaken. And when they confronted me, it wasn't just about the tour politics. It felt like an attack from every angle. Like the people I trusted most were all taking pieces of me at once. She exhaled. The clip doesn't show everything. It doesn't show how I'd been crying minutes before. Or how I was shaking. Or how they kept pushing me even after I asked them to stop. Blake's voice deepened with emotion. That makes it even worse. Gwen leaned back against the couch, her voice softening. After it was over, I locked myself in a stairwell for almost an hour. Just sitting there, listening to the muffled sound of the band playing. My own band, while I felt like I'd been ripped out of my own body. Blake reached over and gently took her hand. I wish I'd been there with you. Gwen smiled sadly. Me too. But maybe it had to happen first. Maybe I had to go through that to know what kind of love I needed later. Blake squeezed her hand, steady and sure. And what kind is that? The kind that doesn't ask me to be perfect, she whispered. The kind that doesn't use my vulnerability as ammunition. The kind that listens, even when I'm scared to talk. Blake's thumb brushed over her knuckles. Well, that's all you'll ever get from me. For a moment, silence fell again, but it was a different silence. Softer. Healing. Gwen looked at him with a mixture of relief and lingering fear. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. Blake shook his head. You told me when you were ready. That's all that matters. Gwen lifted her hand to his cheek, tracing the roughness of his beard. I love you, Blake. He leaned into her touch. I love you too. And I love every part of your story, even the painful ones. They made you who you are. She rested her forehead against his, eyes closing as if the truth finally felt lighter. After a long, quiet moment, Blake spoke again. Do you want to watch it together? The clip. Gwen tensed, then slowly nodded. Yeah. I think I need to. Blake reached for the remote, pulled up the video on the TV, and paused it at the first frame. Gwen standing in that dim basement of a venue 20 years ago. Her younger self looked fierce, furious, and frightened all at once. Gwen's chest tightened at the sight. Before we play it, Blake said, his voice low, I want you to know something. She turned toward him. You survived that night. And you became stronger because of it. And the woman on that screen is someone I admire, even if she was hurting. Gwen inhaled shakily, then nodded. Okay. Let's watch. Blake hit play. The audio crackled. The grainy camera shook. Voices rose. Faces tightened. The argument spilled out in raw, jagged pieces. Gwen watched her younger self fight back tears as she stood her ground. She saw the exact moment her trust shattered. The exact second her heart broke in a way that changed her forever. Blake watched too, but his eyes never left Gwen. When the clip ended, Gwen let out a breath she felt she'd been holding for 20 years. Blake set the remote aside and gently wrapped his arm around her, pulling her to his chest. "You didn't deserve any of that," he whispered. Gwen nodded into him. "I know. I just needed to finally say it out loud." Blake held her tighter, his voice a warm rumble in her ear. "And I'm glad you did. Because now I can carry it with you." Gwen closed her eyes, letting the comfort settle deep inside her. "Thank you for listening." Blake kissed her forehead. "Always." The city lights outside continued to shimmer. The breeze whispered through the terrace. And for the first time in a long time, Gwen felt free, unburdened, understood, and finally unafraid of the story she'd been carrying alone. Blake leaned back, keeping her close, his voice soft but certain. "You know, sometimes the past tries to climb back into your life. But that doesn't mean it gets to stay." Gwen nodded, a small, grateful smile tugging at her lips. "You're right." She rested against him, letting the warmth of the moment wrap around her. And in the quiet of their living room, with the glow of the city stretching out before them like an open horizon, the two of them sat together, healing, connected, and ready to face whatever came next.